Freedom is coming. Liberation is coming. Revolution is coming to Kenya. We can see it in the air. We can feel it in the voices of the despots and their conmen. Their trembling, their fear, their desperation tells a tale of a weakened, despotic state. Why do I say that? I say that because you can see the desperate measures that the despots and their conmen have started to engage in. The so-called BBI handshake is one such desperate measure. They know that constitutions don't murder. Constitutions don't commit electoral fraud. They don't steal elections. Constitutions don't torture. Constitutions don't inflict tribalism on a people or a society. A constitution is not responsible for looting that has been going on in Kenya for the last 56 years. The Constitution of Kenya 2010 did not cause post-election violence. In 2007, when Kibaki stole the elections, then mowed down Kenyans in their thousands and displaced others in their hundreds of thousands. We had a parliamentary system in 1969 when Jomo Kenyatta killed hundreds to thousands of people in Kisumu and engaged in a tribal onslaught on Luos and other groups of Kenyans that were perceived not to be supporting him. Moi was in power for 24 years when ministers came from parliament. It did not stop him from stealing election after election. It did not stop him from torturing Kenyans, including yours truly, in the basement of Nyayo House. It did not stop him from mowing down Kenyans after the 1982 coup attempt. It did not stop him from making Kenya a de jure one-party state. Moi destroyed all public institutions in Kenya and created an artificial class that is mediocre, that is incompetent, that is inept, that is corrupt, that has no morals. He destroyed public educational system so that they can take their children to private schools and abroad, while the poor have nowhere to take their children, so that the poor can end up serving the rich, the mediocre rich. They say that education means nothing, that success does not come out of education, because they know the children of the poor had only one thing that they relied on to get them out of poverty, and that was education. So they destroyed it. They destroyed public health care so that only the rich can access private health care. Then they made insurance too expensive. Then they destroyed medical insurance. So it's not accessible to the general public. It's too expensive. Only the elite can get that. The super elite, the less than 1%. Then they destroyed all parastatals. Kenyatta family ended up destroying Kenya cooperative creameries so that they can produce milk and distribute it through Brookside, which is a financial entity belonging to the Kenyatta family. They have destroyed every single public entity. The Kenya Bus Services that used to charge reasonable fares for the majority of Kenyans was destroyed. The railway system, the Kenya Railway Service, is destroyed so that they could bring in the private SGR. It's basically private. We have funded it to the tune of 400 billion, most of it paid to Muho Kenyatta, the brother to Uhuru Kenyatta, when Kenyans can't afford it. They can't afford to ride the SGR. Moreover, the SGR has not extended beyond Nairobi. They say it is in Naivasha, but I hardly know anyone who has actually taken it. Too expensive, too exclusive, and does not reach the majority of the people. The money they have spent in building the SGR could have built a light rail system for Nairobi, for Kisumu, for Eldoret, for Mombasa, and for Nakuru, and would have been transporting the majority of Kenyans in those cities. That would account for probably more than 50% of the Kenya's population. But no, they wanted to serve the elite. They burdened you with their debt so that they can continue to dominate you. I have said it repeatedly that the amount of money these despots and their conmen have been stealing since 1963 is more than enough to make Kenya a first world country where public housing is accessible to all that cannot afford to own their own homes, where public transportation is what the majority of people use, like they do in the UK, like they do in most North American countries, like they do in most European countries. I have said it repeatedly that food security should not be something that we speak about 56 years after independence, so-called independence. That the amount of money that we have been robbed of by these despots and their conmen is more than enough to have made Kenya like Hong Kong or Singapore or Malaysia or the best of the countries in the world, the Norways, the Swedens, the Finlands, the Canadas of the world, where public health is not just compulsory, but is accessible to everyone, but where public education is free from primary school to university. It can be done, and it must be done, but it cannot be done when our leaders, so-called leaders, are inept, are unethical, are looters, and are murderers. That is what has to stop. When I speak like this, Kenyans tell me, Miguna, this is not North America. This is not Europe. This is not Asia. And I respond, for those who believe in God, did God create Kenya last? Did God say that Africans must be slaves? No, God did not. God created, if you believe in God, everyone in his image, including Kenyans. Kenya was not created last. And for those who believe in evolution, Kenya was not evolved or did not evolve last. Civilization, human civilization, started in Africa, which means that Africans should be more advanced than Europeans, North Americans, and Asians. The African brain is not inferior to the Asian or European brain. The African DNA is actually steadier, stronger than the European DNA. We have melanin, which they don't have. We have the best climates, better than in North America and better than in Europe. We have the most precious metals. We have a reservoir of oils from South Africa to North Africa. We have all manner of natural resources, including a fertile soil. There is absolutely no reason why we are a third or fourth or fifth world continent and countries. The only reason for this is because we don't have visionary leaders. We have thieves as leaders. We have murderers as leaders. We have election thieves as leaders. And this situation can only change through a revolution. When we speak of a revolution, most people cry out and say, oh, you want communism, you want socialism. A revolution is a transformation of society. All right? A transformation of society. The millions of Africans and hundreds of thousands of Kenyans that have been murdered since so-called independence have been murdered by capitalist so-called leaders, these neo-colonial despots. They have not been murdered by communists or socialists. The high unemployment that is ailing Kenya at more than 75% of the youth has been brought about by capitalists, your so-called capitalists. They have not brought investments. They have not brought development. They have not brought prosperity. They have brought poverty. They have brought starvation. They have brought hunger. They have brought homelessness. They have brought murder. They have brought electoral theft. They have institutionalized tribalism. That's what you have. You've not experienced socialism. Look at Tanzania. Nyerere's so-called socialist experiment was far superior to Jomo Kenyatta's so-called capitalist state. Look at other so-called socialist states within Africa. They are much superior to the experiment in Kenya. Cuba, a communist country, exports physicians, doctors, and nurses to Kenya. China lends money, billions, to Kenya. It's a communist state. Recently, Uhuru went on a junket with these lazy bums to Russia, another state that was communist, so-called. I don't believe it was, but many of you believe it was. The point here is there is no benefit that Kenyans have obtained through the so-called capitalist system. We need an overhaul of the current system. You can call it an overhaul, you can call it restructuring, you can call it transformation. I call it revolution. Mobilize, don't agonize. Viva! In case you'd like to order my books, for those who are in the continent of Africa, Asia, the Middle East, you can go to www.nuria.co.ke. Nuria is Nuria, nuria.co.ke. For those in North America, go to www.integritylimited.com. Integritylimited.com. Thank you very much for listening to me. Viva!